But first, let's approve the minutes that Ainsley sent with any addition or corrections to those minutes that were submitted. There were a lot of details in there. Thank you, Ainsley. It was probably a lot more than maybe. Oh, there we are again. Any additions or corrections or clarifications that you'd like? Okay, hearing none, do a thumbs up if you're okay. I see thumbs up. All right. So I'll take that and then lots of thumbs up. Thank you very much. So Ainsley, we'll take that as approval of the minutes from February 27th. And what we wanted to share with you today, as we've been talking about for the last couple weeks or months, access to considerable amount of different kinds of data. So Ainsley was able to get the Maryland Longitudinal Data Systems Center recent data. So she's going to walk that through with us this morning. And do you want questions at the ends or during the right in the middle, wherever it fits? So there's a question.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
Wherever it fits, this data is kind of like heavy.
Yeah.
I don't know if Tanya and Tyrese want to introduce themselves. I believe they're new to this group.
Oh, thank you. Please, Tanya, why don't you start?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tanya Murphy. I am the new Assistant Education Director with Danielle Cox. So I've just been on. I'm coming from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. I retired from them in 23 and got a little bored and decided to come back into corrections. So after 20-something years, 20 plus years with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, I'm coming to the state. So I'm getting acclimated to the state system. But
welcome.
Very familiar with corrections.
Yes, I see that.
I was the Assistant Education Administrator for the Bureau of Prisons for the past 10 years.
And Tyrese?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tyrese Brooks. I'm with Maryland Correctional Enterprises, and I was asked by Adam to join based on my interest. I've been with MCE for 18 years as an installation coordinator now, originally starting out as an administrative assistant. So I'm excited to be here.
Welcome. And since we're going around, there's some, so you know all the names and faces too.
Adam, I hope your new position is going well, and I'm glad to have 2 more people joining us.
Yes.
So I'm having a little bit of a monitor issue, so give me like 30 seconds, and it might be that I just have to present without seeing anybody. So if you have any questions, just like feel free to pop in and let me know.
While we're waiting for that, why don't we go ahead, John, why don't you introduce yourself to Tanya and Tyrese?
Okay, so good morning, Tanya and Tyrese. My name is John Griffin. I am a recently returning citizen. I used to be incarcerated for 15 and a half years. And my interest in this committee is to, help provide objective feedback from what people experience in prison, specifically regarding education. And going forward, I hope to become like a voice of reason type advocate to help promote educational efforts in the prison and for those who are coming out and returning into society.
Thank you. Adam, do you want to add anything else?
Well, I did have one question. Tyrese, is Winnie with you, or is she?
Winnie she's actually off today, but okay. It's my understanding she does want to join.
Okay, so there will be another MCE member as well. So I'm no longer with MCE, so I have to step down from that position. I'm with the Office of the Correctional Ombudsman, so I'm still in the realm of everything. And just to get everyone up to speed, at least my perspective for MCE in this subcommittee, I think the intent should still be to get, whether it's a portal or some way to get other state agencies on board with hiring formerly incarcerated. Yep, that's all I've got. And thank you for allowing me to still come.
Yeah, I didn't know about your change, so I guess that's congratulations are in order.
Sure, I guess.
Good.
You don't have to.
Yeah. I'm not sure who John's notebook is, so if you could unmute and say hello and say who you are?
So I think that that one is like an AI that is just like taking notes for.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's an AI bot that I somehow managed to inherit, and I can't get rid of it. So if anybody has any suggestions on how I can get rid of that, I'd be more than happy to listen to them.
Great. And Renee, good morning. We have two new members this morning, Tanya and Tyrese. So do you want to say hello and introduce yourself real briefly? Can't hear you. Not yet. Can't hear you.
Now?
Now, yes.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, good. I'm Renee Yarbo Williams. Good morning. I am Chief of Staff to Delegate Cheryl Pasteur. And because she can't be in these meetings, I am sitting in for her.
And I thought I would share with you also, Tanya and Tyrese. I'm retired from the Maryland State Department of Education.
Oh, me too.
I was in correctional ed for many years, and also the Division of Career Technology and Adult Learning. And then my retirement gig was until tomorrow, have been a coach and a TA provider for the U.S. Department of Labor, working with federal reentry systems and grants. And then we also work with the Federal Bureau when we were doing the OWDS training, the workforce development training, for many years. So that's how I got kind of volunteered into this role, but my background working with workforce programs. So anyway, okay. Good to see everyone this morning, and welcome to our new folks. It kind of changes every time, so I'm sorry that I missed you, but thank you, Ainsley. How is your technology now?
It's working. So I can't see anybody, so feel free to just shout out if you have any questions. So I wanted to give a little note about the data. So the data and charts that are here were done by, so I got data from the Maryland Longitudinal Data Systems Center, which is like kind of the hub for education in the state. The Department of Labor and the Department of Corrections gave employment records and correctional education records to the Maryland Longitudinal Data Systems Center to kind of analyze employment post-release. So although that this data comes from the MLDS Center, these are my charts, and I don't want to misinterpret by saying that like these are from them. So a couple of limitations about these charts. You'll be seeing no correctional education completion record. That doesn't mean that an incarcerated individual does not have outside education. They might have a high school diploma that they completed before entering the system. They might have certain like employment certifications, or they might have a college degree. Additionally, the way that they're tracking employment is called wage visibility, but that doesn't directly translate to employment. Returning citizens may be engaged in different forms, such as like under the table or like cash or something like that. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not employed, but this is just, it shows up in the Department of Labor system. So the first question that we wanted to answer is, how many returning citizens find employment in the first year of release by program? So as you can see in these charts, I will provide these charts to you because they're kind of really in depth after this. So you can see here that the blue is the wages in any fiscal quarter first year after release. So that means in the 4 quarters after that they were released, they had wages in either 1, 2, or 3 of them. And in the orange, it's wages in all 4 fiscal quarters. So they were released and immediately found employment and stayed in that employment all year. And as we can see by program, the transitional and national occupation was the highest level of employment. But completing any correctional education program is associated with higher wages post-release, especially having a transitional certificate that really boosts your chance of having employment. But as we can see, even of those who had wages in one fiscal quarter, we never reached more than like the highest level is 57%, which is not a lot of people. And of those who found employment the whole year, that drops to like less than 1/5 of people. So although completing a CE program does give you a higher chance of employment upon release, that chance is still not very high. So how many returning citizens find employment? Oh, sorry.
I'm
Was there a
sorry.
question?
Yeah, you said to interrupt, so I'll just, I guess I'll
Yes.
interrupt. I'm sorry. What is the difference between transitional and national?
Of
Uh,
course. So an occupational or national or occupational means that you've completed some sort of, so not an MCE program, but one of the Department of Labor's like occupational programs. So like AutoCAD, barbershop, like HVAC, it's completing one of those programs. Transitional, and for those programs, you have to have a GED. Transitional is they're offered like 18 months before you're released. You don't have to have a GED. Those are classes like financial literacy, job skills, like parenting, things that are more set up to like help you find employment, but doesn't give you like a license or certification.
Okay, so it seems like, I mean, it seems like a very few are actually working all throughout the quarters.
Mm-hmm.
Why
Yeah.
do you think that is?
I mean, I think it's really hard to find employment just like when you're immediately released. That's really difficult, but I think that's like a good question that we have to answer. That's not really reflected. Like we can have this data, but the thing of why is going to be really important.
Mhm. Thank you.
Of course. So this is the same question. How many returning citizens find employment 3 years post-release? So the first one was like 1 year out. This is 3 years out, which is usually the benchmark for like when we were measuring recidivism. Again, completing a CE program is associated with higher wages post-release. Completing a transitional and national occupation program resulted in higher wage visibility. But the interesting thing is overall employment went down. So the wages in any fiscal quarter went down about like 15% for each category, but the wages in all 4 fiscal quarters, 3 years post-release, kind of remained the same, so a little bit low. So this kind of indicates that of those who are finding jobs, stable jobs, they're able to keep those jobs all 3 years. But of those that don't have consistent employment, they're even less likely to find consistent employment 3 years post-release.
Yeah, when I looked at that, I was kind of like, okay, just like Adam just said, what are the reasons that they're struggling? You know, are we looking at that anywhere? Why are they struggling to maintain consistent employment? Are we looking at our reentry services? You know, what are the systemic barriers, employment barriers, the employers? Those are the things I think we have to start looking at as well to maintain it, or, you know, to find out why they're not maintaining this employment.
Yeah, for sure.
I believe it's the
Tanya,
wages.
before we a couple weeks ago, we also looked at some of the enrollment numbers and whatever, partly during COVID and after COVID. So we have looked at those. So if you haven't seen that, Danielle has them. So it doesn't necessarily get at the depth of the why, but there has been discussion maybe in some of the past minutes too of explanation of the change in the GED, computer literacy issues of the preparation part, the lack of teachers. So we've had some of those institutional and corrections challenges for the last couple of years. How far back does this data go, Ainsley? I can't remember.
Yeah, I was just
So
gonna
this
ask
was back to 2018.
18. Okay.
2018
Yeah.
to
To,
what?
I think 2023 or 2022.
I believe Tyrese was saying something, but Tyrese, your volume was very low.
I'm sorry. She
Doesn't matter.
mentioned why. She was asking why such a high turnover and getting a job and keeping a job. And I mean, I thought perhaps it was the wages. You come out of prison and you can't afford to take care of a family as an ex-offender because they don't pay much to an ex-offender. So it's kind of hard to keep a job and provide. So yeah.
Yeah, I know we jumped a little bit ahead. Her slide shows.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
You look at that.
But
Yeah.
no, she's right.
Yeah.
The wages are not great. Even the top end.
Yeah, none of them met the median. Well, go ahead, Ainsley. I'm sorry.
Right.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, no, you're totally good. We're going to get there, and I'm glad that we're thinking about these things. So the next question is, how does completing different correctional education programs affect employment in the first year post-release? So of those who obtained a correctional education, like having a correctional education GED was associated with higher rates of wage visibility. So it's good to know that, completing that GED is important for finding employment post-release. And the highest rate of wage visibility was seen in those who had taken multiple programs. So they had taken that CEGED, occupational transition, or occupational and national, sorry, there's a typo there, and the transitional certificate. So we do know that, being involved in programming is important post-release for finding employment.
And I found that really interesting that although it did make a difference, when you look at longevity, it didn't really.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting when you look at that. It made no difference, actually.
Do you mind explaining that a little bit?
Where obtained correctional education
Mhm.
in the GED and no record of correctional education. It's still the same, the 21%, right? Yeah. For all fiscal quarters.
Yes, that's true. Although I do want to add that for getting the National Occupational Certificate, you do have to have a GED. So although it says no record of correctional education GED, they probably had a high school diploma beforehand.
Right.
But so having a GED is definitely really important post-release. And then the same question, if we look at that 3 years post-release, the same thing, having a CEGED or a GED was better for employment. Again, we see that programming, the multiple programming really bolsters your chances. But again, overall employment went down. So now we turn to wages. So we're going to see what are the wages of people who obtain employment upon release. So in all of these, the blue is the first year after release and the orange is 3 years after release. So we are seeing a wage increase over time, which indicates steady employment, but we are also seeing that no category, whether or not you completed a CE program, resulted in that green line, which is a living wage in Maryland. So you can have all of the occupational programs and still not be earning that $51,000 post-release. So I think that, I can't remember who said it, but that really lends to one of your points that, those wages, you might have a steady job, but if you're not able to feed your family, you're probably not going to want to stay there.
Is the living wage just for a single individual?
I believe it is. I think it is just a single individual.
A lot of people have spouses, children.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that even goes less far when you consider that.
Yeah, for sure. And then we're looking at where are people finding employment? So this really goes hand in hand with the next one, which is the wages for each category. So we're kind of seeing that there's a lot of people in not transitory, but retail and food services versus construction, manufacturing, wholesale trade, which are the ones that give you higher wages. So and that are most associated with the occupational programming that's provided. So if we go to see the difference in wages for those able to obtain employment, obtaining the national or occupational certificate does lead to higher wages than only obtaining a transitional certificate, but obtaining a national or occupational certificate leads to higher wages in industries that may require training. So the most money that you can earn is in construction, manufacturing, wholesale trade, which, you know, those certificates, the occupational programs, that's what that's for. But we're seeing also that the construction, manufacturing, wholesale trade, there's not a lot of people. There's like 30% of people who are in those industries, and a majority of the food services, administrative and waste management, and retail trade are kind of the lower end of the wages that you can earn. So that's
How did it, I mean, I guess as an administrator, I understand how we're a waste, but what is the carryover between administrative and waste management?
So that's a question that I'll have to look into about how the Department of Labor like codes certain jobs, because I'm not exactly sure about that, but I can get the answer to you.
Okay, it just seems like the combination of the two just seems odd to me, but
Yeah, yeah.
I would venture to guess waste management is a garbage collection, you know, working for a garbage collection service. Because I know a lot of ex-offenders
And it
do.
looks like even though they're in,
John, what were you saying?
I know a lot of ex-offenders do find employment in, you know, like the garbage collection services, either through the city of Baltimore or Waste Management Corporation, because they are somewhat friendly to hiring ex-offenders.
Gotcha.
Amanda, good morning. Hopefully you can see the slides that Ainsley is sharing.
So that's the end of my presentation. Does anybody have any more questions? And again, I'll make sure to get this out to everybody.
Miss Ansley,
Yes.
these charts are amazing, by the way,
Thank
and they look awesome. I just wanted to say that.
Thanks.
Ainsley, is this data on your charts specific to the state of Maryland, or is it national data?
It's specific to the state of Maryland.
Okay.
and I guess I'm interested in finding out how do we bridge that gap between those higher wage industries, even though we may be providing those programs, in our students still are not seeing the higher wages, you know, the highest wages in those. They're not meeting, or at least the minimum livable wage. So how do we find out which areas we need to focus on to get them to those higher wages? And is it just employer barriers that, you know, employer bias? You know, what are those factors?
So if I can jump in here, I actually have a lot of opinions on this, based on, you know, my observation of while I was in prison and watching guys go through programs to get released and then struggle to find employment, and now my own employment struggles of finding employment myself. There is a lot of bias. There is still a huge amount of stigma in the workplace, and it's a very delicate topic. So when a returning citizen interviews with a job, you know, the interviewers are always very gracious. They're always very, you know, welcoming.
Ready?
However, when push comes to shove, they don't hire them. Another problem is that when it comes time to make the job offers, the HR departments have screening tools, and most of the HR departments they specifically screen out people who are still on parole and probation, which affects most of those who are being released. Even if they don't have a probation imposed by the sentencing court, if they are getting out anytime prior to their maximum expiration date based on diminution credits earned or good time earned in prison, they are still technically on parole. And a lot of employers screen people out while they're on parole because they consider it a risk. That's happened to me on several jobs that I've applied for. You know, they've all coded me as very low risk, but because of the fact that I'm technically on parole, their HR policies prevent them from hiring me. Another area that I noticed is, for example, in the residential carpentry shop. This is a shop that exists at ECI East Compound. The shop teaches the basic carpentry skills, and they have a certificate that they get through the Department of Labor, as well as the National Center for Education, Construction, and Research, NCCER. But the skills that the shop teaches are very entry level, and the certificate that they can earn through the NCCER is skill level 1, which is basically equivalent to laborer on a job construction site. And so when guys go through and they learn the basic skills of carpentry, but when they come out and try to apply to a construction firm, very often they find that it's an ultra competitive field, and the fact that they have their NCCER level 1 certificate means nothing. They just don't have the level of skill or job experience that the construction firms are looking for. And in talking with several of the shop teachers before my release, because I used to work in the education department at ECI, so I knew all the teachers, they would love to be able to teach more, but they can't. Because the programs are only budgeted for 6-month spots, and they're only allowed to cover the basics and whatever the curriculum they have is, and they can't go beyond that. And they understand that if they could go beyond that, the students could learn more and perhaps gain more experience, and perhaps that might translate into a better profile upon release for employment purposes. So there's the state is doing a lot of things to facilitate reemployment upon release, but at the same time, it's not doing enough. And there's still this huge stigma that exists out there that apparently is within, Maryland is one of the higher level ranking states when it comes to employment stigma for this type of thing.
I'm also wondering
ask
if.
you-
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Let me ask a question as far as I don't know if the state has anything that's similar to the federal bonding incentive. Does the state
Yes,
They
have
do.
that same thing
yes.
They do.
and not getting the buy-in?
Well, what happened, I don't know about like this month, but in the past, Maryland only bought so many bonds. So that was another budget issue. So we had to be careful to not oversell it because it wasn't funded. But also in many cases, sort of to John's point, if they had if the person had a record of theft, even a federal bond was not going to deter them because of the risk.
Right.
But the other charges, it would work. But again, yes, we have used it in the past, but it hasn't been as big a deal as we would have hoped it would have been.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the tax credits. Employers will either kind of take you or they won't. I see John shaking his head too. It's kind of in that. But again, there's been this lack of attention, I think, to our people for some time now, because of other things. So, any other question for Ainsley about that presentation, or any other questions? I know that's a lot to go in. Sorry.
One question that I have is like, of those certificates that they're giving out, are there any employment barriers as like licensing that I know occupational licensing, that's an issue I haven't looked into, but I don't know if John, if you know if any of those certificates like HVAC, there's like a barrier to getting a license if you have like a record or anything like that.
Well, it depends. For a lot of like the trades, carpentry, HVAC, plumbing, et cetera, I'm not aware of any barriers to having, because of having a criminal background. And it just comes down to, the risk assessment that the employer takes and whether or not they're willing to take on the risk of hiring an ex-offender. There, in some of the other programs, like for example, the Peer Recovery Specialist program, they actually, and their Behind the Walls program, They train guys to become certified peer recovery specialists, and they get the Maryland State certification for that, which is a field that's supposed to be incredibly felon friendly. And, for the most part it is, but there are some companies out there or some organizations out there who will not hire you even if you have a CPRS because of the particulars of your background. Some, like for example, if you try to work for an agency that takes care of autistic children, and you happen to have a conviction that relates to children somehow, they're not going to accept you, even if you have a CPRS or even if you went on and got an LCPC in graduate school, because they view that as too much of a risk. So there's still a lot of stigma that goes around this.
Yeah, and I think too that for a while we did a lot of work to try to remove some of the licensure barriers. For a while, it was only cosmetology and real estate that was technically could not even get it. But again, to John's point, it's been case by case in so many areas. So,
John, you don't have to answer this. I'm just wondering what is your education level?
I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in philosophy with a minor in natural sciences. I went to what's now called Loyola University of Maryland. I went there back when it was called Loyola College. I came from the information technology field. That's the field that I was in prior to my incarceration.
Yeah, so I think that you really represent one of the major issues here, where we this is about education reform, and we have a gentleman here who's more educated than a lot of the people that are working in the facilities themselves, and he's I don't know if you're still looking for work, but you've obviously had a lot of struggles as you've spoken to. So that's regardless of what education is being served inside the facilities, there is that missing piece that is really, really relevant.
Yeah, I am still looking for work. It's been about 6 months now since my release, and I'm no further along today than I was in the beginning. But yeah, you're right. Education does make a difference. I will say this: education does make a difference. Ainsley's data shows that. No, the data is not great because the living wage issue is still a huge issue. The percentages are still very low, but prison's a revolving door, and all the guys that didn't bother to get education while they were incarcerated came right back because they reverted back to their original modes of thinking and went back to what they knew, which was the street life, and that brought them right back into prison. And when they came back in, they would say to me, "I should have listened to you. I should have signed up for that GED class." Well, yeah, now you're back with a longer sentence on top of what you already had. So education does make a difference, and even the correction system believes that. When you talk to prison administrators, wardens, chiefs of security, etc., they echo that fact. They tell you that the two best things that make a difference out in rehabilitating people and preparing them for society is education, and then participation in like a spiritual or religious service. So it does make a difference. We can do better. But the state's not doing bad, in my opinion. The biggest issue is just getting past the employer stigma. And to your point, Adam, that's going to require, a lot of, visual advocacy. A lot of people speaking up saying, "Hey, listen, you can hire these people. It's okay," which is part of what drives me. That's why I participate in this committee, to try and become that voice of advocacy to help push the cause for formerly incarcerated people to get these jobs.
I think if we had a strong message from the governor as well. I know before COVID, we did a lot of work with chambers of commerce, the workforce system, did career fairs inside the facilities to bring employers in. But a lot of those activities, for a variety of reasons, have been cut back. So it's going to take a while to get back up to scale. And we've seen that with the data as well. So any other questions about that, or can we move on a little bit?
Sorry, I have one more question. I'm wondering if MCE has any post-release employment data. I know that that has been an issue, with like confidentiality and stuff. I would love to see it if you guys have it so we can compare, but it's also, if you don't have it, then you don't have it. So
It was all our post-release was done by Janet Lane, who is retired. So it was entirely anecdotal.
okay.
And it would just be, people reaching out to her. I got a job, I got a car, blah, 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 this, that, or the other. It's tough because MCE does not have any authority. Again, this is a very directly on parole and probation to be responsible for holding that data, as they are responsible for supervising those individuals post-release. Yeah, I think that MCE could definitely do a better job trying to track that data. But again, you can't force people to reach out to you once they're,
Mhm.
Well,
it's all based on relationships is how we're
But with Adam,
able to-
wasn't there an issue with case management? Because we were trying to get that information from case management to
Yeah.
find out who came through our program in order to create our recidivism study. And there was an issue, like we couldn't get that information. It wasn't readily available.
Well, I think Tyrese, as you'll find from being in this commission, data does not flow freely, and it's not kept accurately, which is a big issue. I think that this commission is trying to tackle.
Mhm.
But you're right, case management. They have information like the wait list for MCE that we have to pull from them. And the thing is that I found out as I was leaving that the case managers really, they set their own guidelines, right? Because we got a letter stating that a gentleman wasn't able to work in a shop because he hadn't been employed in a different part of the facility under DPSCS for 6 months. And that is not an MCE rule. That is a case manager specific decision.
and I will say that we, Danielle and I, are working on the grant with BJA where we will have education and employment specialists who will be able to track our students' higher ed and occupational post-release. So it's 3-year funded. Who knows if we'll be able to follow up afterwards, but that's a start. So we're hoping that.
Where will they be? Will they be one place here or 2 places there, or regional, or what's your capacity? Do you know yet?
So it is targeted for 3 specific regions for those returning to Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and PG County. So that's the target. Those who are in the higher ed programs and those in the occupational training programs. So, I think we had 30 in each program, and up to 60 for those who are in the vehicles for change.
Oh, okay.
So we're going to be tracking those who are involved with vehicle for change and with the higher education. But with those working on those higher ed degrees, it takes them a few years before we even get graduates.
Yeah,
So
and it's a small number anyway.
it's a very small number.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
very
I'm
small
worried about the
number.
masses,
Yeah, but it may be a start because I
It's a
know
start.
that's always been the issue with correctional ed, that you can't track those after post-release. And again, even this, it's going to be voluntary. They have to volunteer to allow us to follow them. So that's always a barrier.
Mhm.
And John, I don't know if you have any, insight on that. What's the key to getting those individuals to, volunteer to allow us to track them post-release?
I think the key there would simply be follow-up, and somebody asking them, would they be willing to be tracked? That's a conversation that largely is not being had with individuals post-release. For example, when I was released in October of last year, the first thing I had to do was go see my parole and probation officer. She told me I need to go find a job or go back to school. Okay, no problem. but she never asked me if I could have my information put into some sort of a database, to your point, where, you know, my success or my progress could be tracked. DPP, you know, like you said, keeps everything very close to the chest. You know, they don't share it for whatever reason. I imagine they don't share it because of security reasons. At least that will be the reason that they would give. I'm not an expert on what the security reasons might be, but one of the things that, you know, we are instructed to do as, you know, released individuals is don't fraternize with known criminal actors, which is often other people who've been released, because unfortunately the majority of those who are released do go back into criminal activity. And, you know, we're not supposed to fraternize with people like that. So that may be why they keep it under security. So as a way to compartmentalize each individual person as a form of control, perhaps. But it does have that negative effect of, you know, keeping a secret, so to speak. But I think that if people were asked if they would be willing to be tracked, I think the majority of them would say yes. I mean, certainly I would have said yes if they asked me, you know, hey, can we follow you? Can, you know, we track your progress? Sure. You know, I have nothing to hide, and if, you know, my story helps others, you know, please, let's publish it. I'll type it up for you. So it's just a matter of adding that to, I guess, the script for when people are interviewed. But I'm not sure that DPP is really prepared to do that either. You know, their focus is case managing us to make sure that, you know, we don't break the law and we don't recidivate, and, you know, we don't do anything wrong to protect the public safety. Maybe there's another agency that should do it. I don't know. I guess that's a talk for another time in a larger context, perhaps.
Well, John, if you go to parole and probation and they tell you that you need to get a job, then it is 100% their responsibility to document that. That's part of the journey of watching your probationer, right?
Sure it is. And they do document it. So, you know, when I find a job, I'm supposed to tell them what the job is, and I'm supposed to send them copies of my paycheck to prove that I'm actually getting paid. And so they are storing that information. They're going to store that data.
But what do they do with it then? Because they're keeping it under lock and key.
Right. That's the question. And, you know, I don't know, because my probation officer, who has been very gracious to me, has not told me what they do with it. I guess they use it from their own internal case management perspective to eventually, I guess, determine at what point do they make me unsupervised, close down my file, you know, decide that, okay, I'm no longer a risk. I don't have to worry about this guy. He's fine. You know, so I imagine that's what they do with this data, just to kind of build, you know, a case scenario saying, yes, he's no longer a risk to society. We don't have to watch him anymore. But that same data could be incredibly useful, especially to the initiatives we're talking about here, as well as in a bunch of other initiatives, I'm sure. The question is, how do you get them to release it? How do you get them to share it?
I don't know, but that's the recidivism data. You know, they're the ones who hold it.
Yeah, yeah, directly so. You're right.
I think that should be one of the recommendations of the council, is for parole and probation to open themselves up, so to speak.
I would agree, because, you know, honestly, it should be a matter of public record anyway. You know, my conviction is a matter of public record. You know, if you want to Google search me, you can, and you'll see my conviction online and all that. So I'm released. That's a matter of public record as well. So what I'm doing post-release, trying to reestablish in society, I would think should be a matter of public record also. You know, from my perspective, and my perspective, I think is the same for the majority of people who are post-release. We have nothing to hide, so we're more than happy to tell the world, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm trying to do. So there should not be any issues with sharing that data. I mean, there might be some individual objections here and there, but you're always going to have that. But as a matter of policy, especially when it comes to public safety, the more we can show how education efforts pay off and help guys move on from prison back into society successfully, I think the more safer that makes society anyway, because it shows people that we do have a valid, trusted workforce here. These people can take jobs, they can do well, they can perform well, and they can be regular members of society. And maybe the fact that we're not sharing that, maybe the fact that DPP doesn't share that, could you say it contributes to the stigma? It contributes to the wrongfully but negative perception that formerly incarcerated people are bad?
Yep.
Perhaps. I suppose you could make that argument. But if that information was shared, then the reverse could happen. Society could say, "Oh wow, so these people do rehabilitate."
Lift the curtain a little bit. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's a good
exactly.
point.
And in the interest of time, too, any other? I heard Adam's again suggestion that we move forward with recommending that, in addition to all the other data we've been trying to get, if parole and probation could be more forthcoming with their data outcomes, that would be more instructive. I imagine they don't have any qualitative data either, particularly. But any other information requests that you can think of that we need today, other than we've already talked about? All right. We know that the session is still in. It's not complete yet, but we just wanted to bring up, are there any legislative updates that would impact our work right now that you're aware of?
So I just want to give a brief update on House Bill 877. That is the bill to extend the length of the commission, I think until 2029. So that has passed the House, and I'm going to be attending. It's being heard today in the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee, so I'm going to be there at 1 p.m. And I'll let you guys know if it gets passed through committee or through the House or the Senate.
Is there any pushback one way or another?
No, I think that people are very, I think commissions tend to extend a lot of time, and I don't think that there's anybody who's opposed to the work that we're doing.
Yeah. Okay. And do we know anything about the pre-release status, the bill related to the women's pre-release?
I'm not sure about that one, but I can look it up.
Well, there's going to be a frenzy pretty soon anyway when they finish out. But all right. Any other legislative updates? Okay. Any other questions or things that that's come to mind while we're here today? And welcome again to Tyrese and to Tanya. I know it's a lot of new information and a lot of, not necessarily new to you, but just in this context. So
Thank you.
and there will be minutes like before. We have about, what'd you guess, Ainsley, like 5 other people that sometimes are here with us. So they come and go. So
yeah,
it's a little bit hard to stay focused a little bit. Renee, did you have any feedback or updates or anything from your legislator?
Well, Delegate Pasteur, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, good. Delegate Pasteur's bill, HB 853, which is the Second Look Act, was heard in the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee on Tuesday. So we're waiting to see, because it passed both chambers. So now it had to go to committee in the Senate. So we're just waiting. And we're crossing our fingers that it will go through and we can put that to rest and it becomes law. We hope so. So we'll see. There is a lot of pushback from a lot of different groups, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Ainsley put in one that Monica Cooper pre-release act passed the House and is now going to the Senate Judicial Committee, Proceedings Committee. Good. Okay. That's something. So we'll see a lot in the next couple weeks. So by the time we meet again, the end of April, we'll have more information and we can look at what impact that may have on our work.
Yep.
So is there anything else for the good of the cause today?
I just wanted to thank Ainsley for handling all that legislative stuff and keeping us going.
Absolutely.
Yay.
Yeah. Yes, we get to spend quality time together sometimes, so we appreciate it. There's, as you would imagine, there's a lot goes into even an hour-long meeting in terms of prep and all that. So, and I appreciate it as being the volunteer chair. I couldn't do it with my workload, my other stuff. But after the contract ends tomorrow, maybe it won't be so bad. So, and it's just as a side note, again, these were all grants around the country that we're working with folks in reentry programs, and we have no information, no indication at the moment they are going to be funded or released. So that is a very disturbing, upsetting reality, not just in Maryland, but across the country. So we have a lot of work to do, and we've got to figure out how we can do it without federal support. So it's good that you left the federal before they did what they did.
Yes, they're wreaking havoc right now.
Are they? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
You still, I imagine you still have friends there.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. That
Yes.
makes it hard.
Even affecting the local institutions at the institution level. It's affecting them. They're going to lose a lot of officers. I don't know how they're going to. They're taking away their incentives, pay incentives where they work at institutions that are, in remote areas and things like that. So, yeah,
There's not enough officers anyway. They'll slam all the
they
programs.
were right. They were already short-staffed. So,
We live in interesting times. Let's
Yes.
end on a happy note. The sun is out here in Maryland, so that's a good thing. Safe travels when you're on your next meetings, and we'll see you again, if not before, on April 24th. Anything I forgot, Ainsley?
Just a quick note that April 24th, we're meeting at 10 to 11. So we're just pushing
right.
it back an hour after session, but that's it.
Thank you.
thank
Okay.
you all. Ainsley, great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you all. Thanks again.
Bye.